China in the 1910s was in the midst of stormy times. At this crossroads of historical transition, a group of pioneers raised the banner of democracy and science and tried to awaken the sleeping nation with the power of culture. The new culture movement they initiated was in full swing, and although it was short-lived, it left behind a far-reaching aftermath of ideas. In this episode, we go into the heart of this cultural enlightenment and explore its spiritual legacy. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, China was in the midst of a profound social crisis. With internal and external troubles and the presence of foreign powers, the traditional feudal rights and the imperial system could no longer support the awakening national self-consciousness. It was at this crossroads of history that a group of insightful people gathered and proposed the two keys of democracy and science in an attempt to open the door to China's modernization. Chen Duxiu, as a pioneer of the new culture movement, was resolutely opposed to feudal autocracy and the blind cult of tradition. Writing in New Youth, he called for democracy, not only the struggle for political rights, but also the liberation of freedom of thought. He emphasized that only when individuals could be truly free could society be renewed. As a representative of the cultural reformist school, who she regarded science as the fundamental driving force for social change. He drew on Dewey's philosophy of pragmatism, advocating bold assumptions and careful proof and opposing superstition and blind obedience. For him, science was not only the laws of nature, but also a truth-seeking and pragmatic way of thinking. The core of science is the spirit of rational inquiry. The new culture movement was not only a political revolution, but also a profound movement of cultural self-awareness. They hoped to deconstruct the old cultural constraints through the spirit of science and to promote the renewal of modern education and social systems. The ideal of democracy likewise goes beyond the political system. It implies that everyone has the right to express himself or herself and to criticize the confines of tradition. Participants in the new culture movement firmly believed that only through the liberation of thought and the awakening of the individual could the nation truly move toward rejuvenation. This movement, under the banners of democracy and science, illuminated the sleeping Chinese national thought and laid the groundwork for subsequent political changes. It was a practice of cultural self-consciousness and a call for ideals. The dissemination of ideas of the new culture movement cannot be separated from the diverse paths of cultural practitioners. As the front line of the movement, the magazine New Youth has been the main battlefield of ideological agitation since its inception in 1915. While Chen Duxiu criticized feudalism with a sharp brush, Li Dazhao sought a breakthrough between Marxism and national liberation. The magazine not only published a large number of new ideas, but also triggered an awakening and heated debate among the young generation. At the same time, She advocated the vernacular language movement, which promoted the use of plain and easy-to-understand language to express ideas, break the shackles of ancient texts, and promote cultural participation among the masses. His academic views, which emphasized bold assumptions and careful proof, drew on Dewey's pragmatism in an attempt to inject rationality and vitality into Chinese culture with scientific methodology. Educator Cai Yuanpei stood on another path. He advocated inclusiveness and promoted the concepts of freedom of thought and all-round development of morality, intelligence and physical fitness at Peking University. Cai Yuanpei's reform of Peking University not only set up a platform for the emancipation of ideas, but also provided space for the exchange of different schools of thought and cultural ideas. It was under his support that Peking University became an important position for the new culture movement. During this period, there was an interweaving and collision of many voices in the intellectual world. Radical calls for democracy and revolution, moderate cultural reformists, and builders focusing on educational practice each participated in this cultural change in different ways. Whether it was fierce political appeals or calm academic explorations, together they formed a colorful picture of the new culture movement. The new culture movement was not only the self-consciousness of elite intellectuals, but also the practice of the vast number of young people in pursuit of spiritual liberation and social progress. Countless students took to the streets, organized lectures, set up reading clubs, and passed on the fire of democracy and science through their actions. The diverse paths taken by these practitioners demonstrate the complexity and wide-ranging impact of the new culture movement, and also show us that cultural change is not a one-line process, but multiple explorations in which ideals and realities are intertwined. The influence of the new culture movement went far beyond the political system and science and technology. It penetrated deeply into the spiritual world and national character of the Chinese people. Lu Xun, the literary giant of his time, became the vanguard of this ideological revolution with his works that struck straight to the heart. His Diary of a Madman uses the ritualistic metaphor of cannibalism to profoundly expose the spiritual oppression and destruction of man by the feudal society. Through the perspective of a madman, Lu Xun calls for society's awakening and reflection on archaic customs. Immediately after that, the true story of Ah Q uses a humorous and pungent tone to depict the psychological state of ordinary people in that era: self-deception, numbness, blind obedience, and self-congratulation in the face of humiliation. These images profoundly reflect the inner dilemmas and cultural ailments of society at large, reminding people of the need to reflect fundamentally on the weaknesses and flaws in the national character. Cai Yuanpei, on the other hand, as another central figure of the new culture movement, turned his attention to education itself. He proposed that the revival of the nation depended not only on institutional change, but more importantly on the cultivation of modern citizens with personality independence and spiritual freedom. Cai Yuanpei firmly believed that only the awakening of the individual's mind and emancipation of his personality could truly promote the progress of the entire nation. This means that the transformation of the individual's mind and spiritual self-awareness is the root of social progress. The new culture movement advocated not only the spirit of science and the system of democracy, but also an all-round cultural renewal, slavery, ignorance, and self-paralysis of the profound reflection and resistance. From book clubs in the streets, to lectures in universities, to the dissemination of newspapers and magazines, the new culture movement set off an unprecedented storm of ideas. It inspired generations of Chinese people to examine their own cultural roots and to awaken their long-suppressed national self-esteem and self-awareness. This spiritual awakening, like a seed in spring, was buried deeply in the soil of the nation, waiting for its future blossoming. It laid a solid foundation for subsequent social reforms and ideological emancipation, and became an indispensable spiritual wealth in the process of China's modernization. Although the new culture movement took place 100 years ago, its spiritual legacy, like a long lighting torch, has illuminated the long path of thought for generations to come. Today, in the lecture halls of colleges and universities, teachers and students are still enthusiastically discussing the significance of democracy and science and exploring the path of China's modernization. The ideals of this movement have not yet been fully realized, but the seeds of thought it planted have continued to take root in the storms of the times. It has inspired generations of young people to dare to question tradition, pursue truth, and aspire to change. Whether it is the continuation of the May 4th movement, the ideological enlightenment after the founding of New China, or the cultural reflection after the reform and opening up, the spirit of the new culture movement has always been awakened at critical moments and become an important force for social progress. However, as history evolves, reflections on the limitations of the new culture movement have also emerged. Has the tendency to over-Westernize overlooked the unique value of Chinese culture? How can the concepts of science and democracy achieve integration with traditional Chinese culture? These questions still provoke heated discussions among scholars and the public. As Cai Yuanpei said, freedom of thought and independence of spirit are the true soul of the nation. In today's world of globalization and informatization, these words still have far-reaching practical significance. We not only need to inherit the enlightened spirit of the new culture movement, but also need to combine it with the pulse of the times to promote the innovative and diversified development of culture. This is an ongoing cultural trial and the responsibility and mission of every generation of Chinese. Only through continuous reflection and advancement can the flames of democracy and science forever burn unceasingly on the Chinese soil.